Good afternoon. I hope you have grabbed your coffee. The black coffee is really good today. Fashion Summit has adopted a non-printing approach. The conference program, speaker profiles, and Q&A online platform are all available on our event app. By scanning the QR code on the back of your entrance admission ticket, the badge, you will be able to access. Please be reminded to keep all mobile devices on silent mode, and video recording is strictly prohibited during the program. Neither eating or drinking, they're prohibited. Thank you for your attention. Please scan the QR code at the back of your admission badge to access our online platform to submit your question if you have any question to ask in the Q&A. So let us begin our next panel discussion, Circularity Opportunities for Asia. May I invite our moderator, Dr. Christina Dean, founder of Chair Redress, founder CEO of the Art Collective, and our speakers, Mr. Rod Henderson, president of TAL Apparel Limited, Ms. Thu Le, not too late, too late. Okay, is that correct? Okay, sustainable fashion designer, Redress Design Award alumni from Vietnam, and Mr. William Wie, manager of Sustainable Customer Solutions Company, Wenzhou, Tiancheng Textile Company Limited. Please proceed to the stage. Thank you.
Hello. We're on. We need to turn them on, that old tech thing. Thank you very much to my speakers who you're going to hear from in a moment, and thank you to you. We've 44 minutes and 40 seconds to go before you can start your evening, and we're going to pump this time with a lot of fantastic information, insight into circularity in Asia, the opportunities. There might be some bad news within there, but we're here for opportunities. To frame briefly the topic, I think the fashion industry has had a major wake-up call. You can go to all of these panels, conferences here around the world. We know we're in a very dire problem in terms of lack of circularity and excess waste. To frame it, supposedly we're producing 100 billion, 150 maybe even billion garments every year. The majority of the clothes that are produced every year will end up in landfill or incineration. Tremendous waste of resources. According to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the equivalent of one dumper truck of textiles is either landfilled or incinerated every second around the world. We've been banging on about that stat for about 3 years, so if you're bored of it, apologies, but it's still a very big number, a dumper truck of textiles. So to us at Redress, who are advocating for a circular economy, these kind of stats are basically a nightmare, and the nightmare is only getting worse because as we produce more, we waste more, so too does obviously waste, carbon emissions, greenhouse gas, the whole bag of environmental pollution also increases. But we're only here to talk about opportunity today, although there will probably be some bad news, because the question is, how do we turn what is basically a nightmare into an opportunity? And certainly as we are here in Asia, and as the title of this panel suggests, Opportunities for Circularity in Asia, we're sitting on a tremendous amount of textile waste stroke resource, being the production base of the world. And Asia houses emerging markets. People are buying clothes left, right, and center. We see consumption in Asia obviously hit the roof. So theoretically, this is a beautiful situation where we've got a lot of waste, we've got a lot of consumption, we've got a tremendous backbone of fashion, industry, production, infrastructure, and investment. So we should be able to get it right and turn the nightmare of the circularity and the lack of circularity into a reality for opportunity. So my speakers are going to help inform us of their respective fields around the opportunities and challenges thereof within circularity. So I'm going to ask each of my speakers to introduce themselves and to share what keeps them up at night in relation to circularity in Asia. I'm going to start with Tu, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Tu, and I was a Redress menswear winner the cycle 2020, the year of the COVID. And currently I am a co-founder of a design consultancy firm in Vietnam. So we focus on accelerating the sustainable development of the creative industries in Vietnam. Thank you.
And what keeps you up at night, though, Tu? What do you worry about most? And by the way, we will get to good news. I just want to get the bad news out of the way here. What keeps you up worrying about lack of circularity or circularity in Asia?
Vietnam is one of the top 3 destination for manufacturing in the textile industry in Asia. So we are just right behind China, and we are on equal, I think, opportunity with Bangladesh. And we have already seen what has happened in Bangladesh and China with the pollution. And I really hope that Vietnam will not be in the same situation, and we can focus on developing a more sustainable future. Yes.
Thank you, and Rod.
Okay, hi, Rod Henderson, and I'm from TAL Apparel. My background, I started in retail. I was from the UK, so I started that in London, moved to Hong Kong 14 years ago. Been in the apparel business for a few years. So, what keeps me awake thinking about circularity, I think really at the moment, is this limited recycling infrastructure. So it's how do we get going on recycling? And I think with that, probably my second point really is that they're worried about is legislation and policy. I think there's going to be a lot of that coming our way in the next few years. But I think that's a big driver to really giving clarity to the industry about the direction it needs to move in. And we're currently in a industry where there's many different factories, many different ideas around sustainability, lots of different countries involved, everybody doing or attempting to do it their way. So it's how do we pull this together and get some scalability behind it and some momentum behind it?
Well, given that TAL's manufacturing in how many countries?
Not so many now, 3.
3. Well, you're kept awake at night by multiple countries and their future or incoming legislation. So you spoke of recycling infrastructure. Perfect sort of segue to William to introduce yourself and what sort of worries you, keeps you up at night about circularity in Asia?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. So, hi everyone, my name is William Wie from Wenzhou Tiancheng, the largest recycled cotton spinning mill in China. And presently I'm based in Shanghai, and we actually, as the spinner, we always like handling close relationship with different brands such as European sports brand, fast fashion, and even nowadays with the development of the circularity in the economy, even the luxury group companies, we are working very closely with them. What we are doing is actually to produce recycled cotton yarn, not only 100% cotton, but also TC and CVC blended yarn as the supplier to all the brands, like with over 50,000 tons of recycled cotton yarn.
Say that last bit again, 50,000
tons
per
year.
Per year. And what keeps you up at night?
Well, personally, in one hand, we are happy to see the increasing concern in the topic of circularity not only in EU but also in Asian countries. But in the other hand, that we really eager to want to see the active participation, not only in recycle industry but also the whole industry, no matter where you are in, to try to get in like the real circularity and the real recycle thing.
So thank you for the intro. I'm going to go to my next part of my questions. As you can see, we've got a designer at the focus at the design stage, an expert in manufacturing, obviously responsible for a huge swathe of manufacturing, and then a recycler. So a really strong representation of the supply chain. So I now want to talk to each of you about the actual sort of waste or the resource or the materials that you're actually directly handling, perhaps in the markets that you are particularly active in. So we're going to stay with you, William. Can you give us a bit of information about how the recycling sector in China is changing? I know that you're handling both pre-consumer textile waste and post-consumer textile waste. Yeah, could you just help us with how is the post-consumer recycling? And I was going to focus on post-consumer, but if you want to also touch on pre-consumer, that's also okay. What's been changing?
Well, actually, recently, the demands from the home markets, or let's say the brands, we are negotiating with them that they would love to post-consumer. It would be much more attention to the post-consumer. Of course, the used garments, the volume of the used garments in not only in China, for example, but also globally, it's the biggest volume. So once you could handle the used garments, or let's say post-consumer, of course, you can easily handle whatever kind of waste. So taking our company example, that in the past, we handle many kind of pre-consumer waste, cutting, maybe we are collecting 50 to 60 tons per day of the pre-consumer cutting waste. But nowadays, with the development of innovation and the investment of not only mechanical recycling, but also chemical recycling, we are able to take salt and recycle all the used garments for different brands, of course, to create their own T2T, closed loop, or even open loop, of course, for different models for them.
And are you getting more demand from your customers for recycled yarns or for more recycled post-consumer? What's the demand side telling you about from your customers? Do they want more recycled yarns?
There's no doubt that they would love to increase the demand and the percentage of recycled materials, not only in the yarn part, but also the whole industry, from yarn, fabric, and eventually the garments. So they would love to increase the percentage of recycled materials very eagerly, because due to some policy and legislation.
So the demand is there. I mean, maybe we can get into the technical side, because I suppose the disappointment is the technical side. I mean, why? Okay, so the demand is there. Why are you not doing more?
To be honest, because they don't place the huge order to us. Just joking. Yeah, and technically, because when we handle used garments, it's not that easy as when we handle pre-consumer as cutting weight, because they only one single composition, 100% cotton, 100% polyester, when we handle pre-consumer waste. But when we do used garments, it never comes only in one single fibers. For example, natural fibers, synthetic fibers, or even blended. So it's like a magic box. You never know what they are once you open it, and we need to, from our customers, they never, or let's say it's not their responsibility to sort the waste, but our job is to help them to. That's why we tailor-make for the different kind of T2T and closed-loop projects from different brands.
We're going to come to two in a minute, but the whole mixture, the cocktail, the magic box, did you call it?
Yeah, magic box.
Of all these, mixed fibers is exactly what sustainable designers need to sort out. So too, that's your problem, but we'll come to that in a minute. You can relax for a little bit longer. Obviously, your expertise is in China, William, and I want to know which other Asian countries do you think have got, very strong infrastructure capacity, or big competitors to you, or what other Asian countries in terms of recycling pre or post-consumer do you think are doing really well?
Well, besides China, of course, I think Japan is one of the Asian countries that performs well in textile clothing recycling industry, because they got relatively complete recycling system, not only waste collector, but also enterprise recycling, group recycling, etc. And with the support of their government, due to like some policy and regulations, that the recycling rate has exceeded over 20% in Japan, so which provides a very useful experience for other Asian countries in the textile recycling industry.
You may have noticed that too, she gets kept up at night worrying about what's going to happen to Vietnam, given the experiences of textile waste in China and Bangladesh, and we know that obviously Vietnam's production is increasing. So, if you could sort Vietnam out, William, you could give her a good night's sleep. We need more recycling in Vietnam, and I know, Rod, that's something that we've chatted about quite a bit. So, Rod, that's a perfect segue to you. TAL is obviously a fantastic manufacturer, producing 1 in 6 of the dress shirts in the US with annual capacity of 50 million garments, incredible capacity. And because of your huge capacity and your production volume, obviously you're sitting on a lot of textile waste, be that cut and sew, defect garments, fabrics, etc., in multiple countries, as you just said. So in your sort of long career, how has recycling or waste management changed specifically around sort of textile waste?
Yeah, so I think, there's been a lot of significant change, and it was quite interesting, this question, going back and reflecting and, realizing that, the textile industry is moving forward. I think sometimes we forget that and we don't give ourselves credit for a lot of the stuff that we've done. And if you think, through increased awareness and regulation, there's a lot stricter environmental policies now. So, there was a lot of waste issues relating to pollution and hazardous chemicals. And, and a lot of that has been solved through legislation. And then I think about computerization and think about the impact that that's had on how we cut fabric. So there's auto cutters now cutting fabric. There's a lot of computer technology that involves in making us more efficient in the utilization of rolls of fabric. So there's waste reduction happening in that process. We're also driven heavily by trying to save cost. And then just, the eco-friendly nature of the topic around that has put in a lot of improvement in, the amount of recycled materials that we now use. The drive to things like regenerative cotton, organic cottons, and now, some of the stuff that William's doing, which is this repurposing textile waste. And we're starting to try and work in that area as well. So.
And same sort of question as William's question, which is, which Asian countries do you think are better set up for material recovery, whether that's for recycling or reuse of materials?
So, I think China, Japan are definitely the leaders. And I can really speak for Vietnam. And the problem we've got is that it's movement of waste, so the technology and the plants are in China. We can't move waste into China because you can't transfer that. So we need the investments to come into Vietnam. And I think Vietnam has the government is very positive about trying to make change and bring in more environmental practices. We're starting to see this happen, and I think over time it will happen. And I think with clarity, legislation is going to push this as well, because buyers are going to be forced more into that direction of using recycled, circular practices, and I think that will drive all countries, manufacturing countries, to be better in that area. So
I want to come to legislation a little bit later. We'll specifically focus on that and what the buyers are required to comply with. 2, you're a sustainable fashion designer. You're very skilled in zero waste and upcycling. You're the beginning of the design stage, where supposedly 80% of the environmental impact of a product is laid down at the design stage. So we know that circularity is really bedded in so much at the design stage, how a product is made, from what, how it's going to be produced, where it's going to be produced, is it recyclable, is it reusable, is it repairable? So many of those decisions are obviously locked in at the design stage. So, I mean, that's certainly why Redress obviously does a lot of education with fashion designers. So what's the business opportunity for designers in terms of upcycling? Because it's a hard world out there for everybody economically, and it's a very hard world if you've got a sustainable fashion brand. Apparently, 97% of the fashion industry's revenue comes from the top 20 fashion brands and groups, of which you too are not. So you've got to convince us. What's the business opportunity of upcycling for? You can answer it obviously in your own perspective as a sustainable fashion designer, but also if you want to argue it in any other way, you can.
Okay, I will start by sharing my own experience with upcycling. So when I first started my own sustainable fashion line in 2021, I have very limited fund, and one of my biggest important decision was to use deadstock fabric that I can easily find in Vietnam. Again, Vietnam is the manufacturer hub of Asia, so we have plenty of deadstock fabric, and I stumbled across a very new and precious material called tin down. Tin down is a copyrighted material from one company in Italy where they make a more responsible version of down feather or down product. They sandwich the down feather in between two layers of very thin, maybe knit material, and that become the sheet of materials that make it very easy to produce down products. And I would have never been able to access that kind of fabric because the MOQ, the minimum quantity, and also the pricing. I got it very cheap because it was deadstock. It was sitting in the storage of some fabric vendors, and that is my main example. My main argument is when you are starting as an independent designer, you don't have a lot of funds, then you have to go to where the ways are because someone's trust is another one's treasure. And we also see this kind of opportunity where big corporation and conglomerates sell the deadstock fabric to the young independent designers. We have the Nona Source initiative from LMVH Corporation, right? And that is one very important business opportunity. So you get premium quality fabric and materials at very reasonable price, and you are saving the environment.
There is a bit of argument going on at the moment about what is surplus, what is dead stock, what is waste, and we're not going to solve it and it's not part of anyone's agenda. Everyone's looking at me going, what the hell is she talking about now? But actually, I know coming out, I think next year, will be much more defined definitions about what is dead stock, what's excess, what's surplus. And why I'm throwing that in now is because from what I'm understanding you're saying is that you're buying what you're calling dead stock. You know, I've got a question, which is that waste? But we can take that we can take that outside, me and you too. I don't know if it's waste if you're buying it, but that's not for the conversation. The question is, if you look at, whatever you're paying per yard, X, okay. Is it much, 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 much cheaper? Clearly the quality that you're getting, yeah?
Yes. So for example, the thin down fabric, they probably retail at, I don't know, $20, $30, but I got it for $1.50 US dollars. Yeah, because the actual, the vendors, the deadstock vendors, they don't know the quality or the importance or the preciousness of the material, and only the designer knows. Yeah.
So you're getting a really good deal. So that's how you can encourage designers to source dead stock, surplus, waste, whatever we're going to call it. Yeah.
And again, for example, Nona Source, they, LMVH, they own the biggest and most luxurious fashion houses, and the material is, I think personally, the materials are what makes the luxury brands their status. And well, in terms of creativity, plenty of other independent designers have that quality. However, we don't have the access to craftsmanship or the little petite hands, right, in terms of craftsmanship and premium quality, for like premium leather, for example. So when we really get into the dead stock or the unused materials from such places, we are able to access that corner of the industry.
And the other big advantage for you must be is minimums. So you can buy exactly what you need, whereas a fabric mill's not going to make your yardage.
Yes, for example, the minimum quantity would be like 100 or 1,000 meters. I would never be able to afford that kind of a MOQ when we are only producing like in terms of 100 or 1,000 units per year.
So you're obviously making a cost saving on the fabric. Brilliant. So let's talk about money, because really, I don't think anyone's after a green halo. Everyone wants to survive and make some money out of sustainability, which is fantastic. Why not? Ellen MacArthur Foundation report 2017. It feels very old because that was a long time ago, but we still use that data because there's nothing better, more recent. But apparently, if it's true, got no clue, 500 billion USD is lost annually because of clothing underutilization and the lack of recycling. So I always think, 500 billion, it sounds like quite a lot to me. If you could flip the loss into a gain, we know that the circular economy should be making money. Is it? Who's making any money? And is it the brands? Is it the suppliers? And where is this money? And anyone can answer. William.
Well, certainly not the recycling.
So it's not the recyclers.
Yeah, because to be really transparent, to be very honest, because the situation, as Rod said, that it's moving forward and it's very quickly day by day, not like year by year. Because when we talk about we have to take raw materials not only from the pre-consumer cutting waste, for example, as to use garments. When we talk about the asking price, it's getting much higher compared to maybe just no need to 10 years ago, maybe just 5 years ago. The asking price is getting higher, but at the same time, when we make as the spinning mill, when we produce yarn, the cost is increasing rapidly. So, and the requirement sometimes, or let's say, from the market and from the buyers, they will not compromise, no matter what kind of reason. So the cost from the spinning mill is increasing rapidly. So yeah, that's my personal opinion.
That's how to answer this question. That one, isn't it?
I mean, the obvious answer is the brands are at the top of the tree. They capture the majority of the revenue. So, higher profit margins, they have a global reach. Number 2 in your list would be suppliers. Margins are typically a lot less than brands. I think there's in the garment industry, there's always has been a price pressure if you look at inflation of garments versus general inflation. And garment manufacturers are reliant on contract manufacturing. And then number 3 would be recyclers. I think it's a new sector. There's relatively small companies in there specializing in this field. But I think there is potential for growth, and a lot of that will depend on the direction that, I guess, legislation is the only way this is really going to be driven. And if legislation drives it and pushes it, then there's, I think, potential for recyclers to take their, become profitable businesses. And we need them to be profitable business, because if they're not profitable, they're not going to operate. So.
Yes, I agree with Rod. I think the brands, and I have to clarify, the brands, not the designers, because in the end, the designer works for the brand. Yes, so.
Okay, so then we have got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is usually overconsumption, but it's not going to be that elephant. It's a different elephant that we're making right now. And the elephant in the room is legislation. It's come up in pretty much everyone's answer. And if it's the brands who are making most of the money because of the margins, it's also the brands that will need to comply with legislation. which will obviously trickle down into the supply chain in terms of operations and recycling, waste management, etc. So apparently, according to Business of Fashion, there are 35 pieces of sustainability-linked legislation that will come into force by 2027. That's sustainability-linked, not all circularity-linked. And we know, and it's come up on the different panels that I've certainly been jumping in and out of today, that obviously the EU has got the most stringent and comprehensive policies that will be enacted in the future. Specifically, the EU Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textiles. I'm going to read it again because the clue of what it is in the name. The EU Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textiles. And if anyone is manufacturing in Asia who doesn't know what it is, please go online ASAP. It's a whole raft of policies that's super, super comprehensive. I'm no expert on it. I've picked one of the actions and the objectives of the policy. I'm going to read it word for word because it kind of covers everything, and there's a lot more to it. So, an objective of the policy is that all textiles placed on the EU market are durable, repairable, recyclable, and to a great extent are made of recycled fibers. They're free of hazardous substances, and they are produced in respect of social rights and the environment. I mean, that kind of covers everything, right? If we could just get that one bit right. I was really, really fascinated that 1 year ago, a piece of financial research came out by UBS, and it was a report for investors who are invested into the APAC supply chain. And this report, on the basis of the EU policy, has called for urgent investment into R&D, upskilling, and for innovations in circularity in order to safeguard businesses that are working in Asia because of this EU policy. 70% of the materials that are imported into the EU are coming from APAC. So let's dive a little bit more into legislation and why should Asia be paying attention to either the EU legislation or anywhere in the world legislation. And Rod, you've got a microphone in your hand, so you're asking for the question.
Okay. So I think Asia definitely will need to comply, and I think the way we operate will be driven by this regulation, and I think that's looking at production processes, the way things are done, looking at our R&D, where we're investing, circular designs, adjusting our operations to fit this. I think the other key element for us is we're going to need probably compliance departments to ensure that we meet the legislative requirements. And various talks I've heard on it. I mean, I've heard often politicians saying quite ridiculous things. One lady from New York told us that she was going to find out exactly how many hours every single worker was doing in a factory. But we need to get something that is a standardization way of doing things, because if the US are working one way, or New York's working one way, California another way, EU another way, and we don't standardize the data, there's going to be a huge pressure on manufacturers to provide all of this data to brands. And there's a lot of work, I guess, on the technology side that seem to be supporting brands on how to collate the data, but not going downstream on how to help manufacturers, and they're going to have to provide a lot of this data. But I think it's also worth recognizing that the garment industry already does a lot. I spoke a bit about the legislation on pollution, but significant progress has really been made around carbon emissions, the Higg index that a lot of manufacturers are working with. There's a move. A lot of factories now have solar panels on the roof. There's a lot of work done on water recycling. If you think about the audit process that factories have to go through, which is relating to labor practices and worker conditions, there's a huge amount of forward movement has happened on that area in the last 20, 10, whatever, 15 years. So, you know, I think the industry will cope. We're agile enough and we can adapt. And I think there's already quite a lot of self-regulating going on, or practices that have been, you know, aligned to brands and retailers' policies. But it's just making sure that we find a standardized way of doing it, and it doesn't become overly complex where every brand or every piece of legislation is asking for something different, and then we become overburdened with the task of complying.
Do you think that, in conversations with brands, are they talking a lot about legislation? And is it something that's on the chopping board, like in the near term, that is worrying them enough, or is it too in the future?
Probably not urgently enough.
Not urgent enough. Coming back to you, William, Asia. You know, it's the focus of our panel is Asia. We're here. Obviously, you've got a significant business in China. What, with all this legislation that's coming up, whenever it comes, clearly not soon enough, what do you think, and why should Asia be, and China, if you want to speak about China, why should China be taking notice of global or European policy, or indeed, of course, Chinese policy?
Well, actually, I think that in like, no matter you're in clothing or let's say textile industry, I think not only brands but also all the supply chain, no matter garment factories, fabric factories, or even like us, young spinner, no one would give up the EU market. So as long as you want to do business with EU markets, you have to follow the EU's regulation. For example, they just passed a bill called EPR. So in the very near future, as long as you want to, just like you said, you want to do the products, you need to make sure that it's like with at least include part of recycling materials, something like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's great news for you, though, isn't it? That the EU wants more recycled content.
Surely, because like to be very honest, that even though in Asian countries that maybe it's like Rod said, it's not that urgent, but it's just a time matter, because like 1 year later or maybe 3 years later, the thing is that we as Chinese supplier, we already been well prepared, because like 2 or 3 years ago, no one in the recycling industry saying the word like traceability, but look at now, everyone just come to you to like, do you get GIS, do you get everything that's related to traceability? The thing is that maybe next year or even maybe later, 2026, there's a word called DPP, Digital Product Passport. So I think it's not about when the law or regulation comes up, but the thing is that you need to well prepare before.
Absolutely. The 14th five-year plan has a goal that by 2030, China will aim to recycle 30% of its textile waste and produce 3 million tons of recycled yarn, I don't know what composition, per year. And that's a steady increase from 2025, 2030, quite, you know, big goals to recycle 30% of textile waste, which is encouraging. Sorry, Rod, did you say at the beginning, someone said that Vietnam was recycling, who said that? Someone said that, 20%, I heard. Was it you?
Japan.
Oh, it was Japan. Okay, good. So Japan, 20%, China aims to be 30% by 2030. I don't know, too, if you've got any comments on EU legislation. I mean, you don't export to the EU, or if you have any comments on, if you want to add anything on legislation or any Vietnamese policies that are affecting you?
Yes, I do want to reinforce Rod's comments earlier about Vietnamese legislation. Like currently, the Vietnamese government is very, very focused on topics such as circular economy. For example, just this November, the Ministry of Industry and Trade organized a green economy forum and exhibition. So it's all about, you know, the topic is very much about circularity and sustainable development, and especially when both the US and EU are the two biggest markets of Vietnam's export industry. But we do face a lot of challenges, mainly because we are very, very underdeveloped in terms of upcycling or recycling infrastructure. We do not have any trash sorting system at all. So even now, the plastic collection and sorting or recycling is very much at like not on a governmental or even on a national scale. So when we talk about textile recycling, there is almost none in terms of official infrastructure. So yes, this is also an opportunity for foreign investor to come into the country and to explore this new industry of textile recycling and upcycling.
Thank you. We have 6 minutes to go, and I want to ask you about the future, your future expectations. But before I ask you that, I'm going to do 2 questions here. So I'm going to read them out, and anyone who wants to answer can answer. It's not directed at anybody. Would reduced sales tax and the lowering of tariffs on recycled/upcycled products be a tool for supercharging the growth opportunity and level the field versus virgin fabric products? So reduced tax as an incentive to leveling the price for virgin. Because actually we have spoken a lot about end-of-life recycling. So moving to, I mean, you'd love a tax break, wouldn't you?
I mean, in terms of reducing tax, it has to be very drastic. Like, for example, if we are talking about 10 or 15% in terms of virgin materials, then the tax for recycled or upcycled materials should be like less than 5. Mm-hmm. So it has to be very drastic difference in terms of tax. I think there are better approaches or better methodologies in terms of accelerating or encouraging the development of the upcycling industry, not just by tax reducing, but focusing on foreign investment, actively working together with the recyclers and the upcyclers to connect the different stakeholders in the industry. So, yeah.
Hopefully we can get to investors in a minute, but I want to ask you, William, about tax. Would a tariff in China, would a tax break on your exported recycled yarns help? Or any tariff incentives?
Surely there's like tax reduction when it comes to when we export our products to, for example, Vietnam, because like there are 70% of sales volume we are going to export to Vietnam, because like ultimately our businesses are in EU market. So, and surely that there's tax reduction for our products, but in like domestic, when we come to domestic sales, I'm afraid that there's no such policy right now. So maybe we are looking forward to in the very near future. And
yeah, it seems even further away. EPR first, perhaps, digital passports, but tax seems further, or incentives do seem further away. Second question, if I may, is I'm going to read it out. Recycling is sometimes touted as a last resort within circularity. Reuse or extending the life cycle of products is more key and effective in the long run. How has this been achieved in each of your organizations? So how are each of you, where relevant, working to reuse or extend the life cycle of products? And I suppose, Rod, you know, how do you, when you're talking to customers, how do you, or do you need to convince them about the durability piece, about all the sort of design elements for reuse and longevity? Yeah.
I was talking to someone about this earlier today. You know, when I first started in this industry, working for a well-known UK retailer based in London, the durability of the garment was super important. and there was a lot of testing done, how many machine wash cycles it would go through, etc. And at that time, quality was about well-made garments that lasted. And I think we've lost that hugely with fast fashion, and that's changed a lot. People don't care about the durability of the garment, and I still don't think there's a huge appetite towards durability. Unfortunately, price is a big driver in everything. And to go back to your other question, would a reduction in tariff or import duty help? Yeah, it would, because often on sustainability issues, the question is who's going to pay for it. The amount of times the request is made to do something more sustainable, but they want it at the same price as the normal method. So people don't want to spend money on that. But I think ultimately we need to make more durable garments that people are prepared to wear for more often and longer. And I think one thing that the US is starting to wake up on, and I've had a few conversations with people in the last 6 months on this topic, is that through COVID and the supply chain issues, they were holding a lot less inventory on their sales floor. And they've suddenly woken up and realized that actually by holding less inventory on the sales floor, they sell more at full price and therefore they make more profit. So this drive to just buy more and more and more and try and chase the top line sales, I think there's a realization that that's not necessarily the most effective way, and that will reduce, in a way, consumption, because the cheaper you make a garment, the more people will just buy it with less consideration.
And that word durable and that EU policy, the first word is durable in all of that. So yeah, the durability. There's a quote that went flying around on Instagram whenever, that the most sustainable pair of sneakers that you've got are the ones that you already own or something like that. But the other one is that the most important attribute to a garment, sustainability, is its durability. So, I mean, it's a very good question. It should be actually at the center of everything that we do. We are actually minus 3 seconds, but however, I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to ask a very quick question. You've got to be quick on this, okay? I want to know your dream for the future. 2030 is coming around the corner. Brands, everybody's made all these big promises for 2030. What are your dreams for that might actually come true by 2030? Very quickly, please. And we'll start with you two.
Okay. Upcycling infrastructure in Vietnam?
For me, advancement in recycling technologies, particularly on synthetic fibers and mixed fiber garments, blends.
Well, to us, we are very looking forward to Q3, Q4 next year, because we already got the very latest innovation of chemical recycling, which can really help us to, like Rod said, we can just stage 1, 100% polyester, but very near future stage 2 separation, that we could really total solve the problem of no matter TC, CVC, let's say synthetic fibers. So that's what we are really looking forward to very soon.
So that's big news for early next year, did you say?
Q3,
sorry, beg your pardon.
Q3, Q4 next year.
So in 6 years' time, you'll be well developed by then?
As we always did.
Good, okay. Well, circularity is either a crisis or an opportunity, and I would hate that it was our generation that fell asleep at the wheel when this crisis and this opportunity was staring us straight in the face. I really want to thank you three for joining us, and so for giving us your time and sharing your expertise, and thank you to all of you for being a willing audience. I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you.